For anyone to believe that the Israelis have greater rights than the Palestinians, it's wrong. It's not doing justice to mankind. And while I respect what President Trump wants to do, I hope he will not reduce the Gaza issue into a property project. It is my great honor to be here in Doha again and attending this Al Jazeera forum. I think the timing of our forum cannot be even better because the world needs transparency and need to hear voices from all parties about what exactly is going on in the world. I know that in many sessions we had today, in the morning as well as in the afternoon, we talked about Palestine. Allow me to share with you my personal observations about this very important and critical issue about Palestine, especially about what's happening in Gaza. First of all, the Palestinian issue, the Gaza issue, cannot be reduced into a real estate property project. That's a shame for mankind. I think there are at least 4 dimensions to look at the Palestinian issue, including the Gaza issue. First of all, at the level of the Palestinian perspective. Secondly, at the level of the Arab world. And thirdly, at the level of the Islamic world. But fourthly, and equally importantly, if not even more importantly, at the level of mankind. So I think at each of these 4 levels, this Palestinian issue should always be considered as one of the most important and most pressing issues in the world of today. For anyone to believe that the Israelis have greater rights than the Palestinians, it's wrong. It's not doing justice to mankind. Therefore, I hope all my countrymen in China, as I believe they do, we all support the legitimate interests of the Palestinian people. I want to go even further to say that if anyone in this world claims to be a friend of the Arab people or the Muslim people, or as a decent person among the ranks of mankind, he or she should support the legitimate interests of the Palestinian people. There should be no guessing, second guessing about that. This should be a very firm commitment for all of us to defend the legitimate interests of the Palestinian people. And while I respect what President Trump wants to do, I hope he will not reduce the Gaza issue into a property project. I will find it extremely insulting to my own dignity and decency if the Palestinian issue involving Gaza will be treated purely as a property issue. That's number one. Number two is that in the meetings today, lots of the panelists talked about moving towards multipolarity, as if the world is moving, is changing its nature. Allow me to mention one thing. We are still living in the world order established back in 1945, after defeating Nazi Germany in Europe and defeating Japanese fascism in Asia-Pacific region. And I hope I can remind all of us that the international order established back in 1945 was not unipolarity at all. It was meant to be multipolarity. Just look at the composition of the Security Council of the United Nations involving 5 permanent member states, each with a veto power. That means that the international order based on the United Nations, especially surrounding the Security Council, was meant to be structured involving a lot of checks and balances. Not any single country was allowed to dominate in the world, as reflected in the international order established back in 1945. Now, since 1945, something went wrong And that explained all the problems in the world of today, especially after 1991, after the end of the Cold War. One big country believed it was the sole hegemon in the world, and it held itself out as if it has the dominance above mankind, and it wants to treat all the others as if they are secondary, if not tertiary, and that country wants to dominate. That country wants to be the boss or the hegemon in the world of today. I just want to remind all of us, that's not the original intent of the international order established back in 1945. That was wrong, and we are not only in the multipolarity in the world of today, we should be blessed that the world is not ruled by any one single power. Because if that is the case, if one single country can dominate above the world, can rule above the world, can always hold a gun at your head, can really destroy free trade and peace and justice, that will not be a world for us to live in, because that will be a world of injustice. Look at Gaza. Look at all the crimes committed against the Palestinian people. The more than 70,000 innocent people killed, about 2/3 of them, if not 3/4 of them, were women and children, including pregnant women. So I think in a better world, in a world with sufficient amount of checks and balances, this kind of brutality and injustice should not be allowed to happen. Now, the other thing is that when we talk about the United States, I was trained at the United States. I have lots of relatives in the United States. Personally, I have no problem with the United States as a big country. But if we look at what the United States has been doing since the beginning of this year, it seems that the United States is suffering from a free fall from the so-called top of the mountain as a beacon to shine upon the path for mankind into the abyss of rule of jungle. That's very dangerous. I think what the United States did to Venezuela and did to President Maduro and the First Lady of Venezuela could happen to any other country, especially countries with rich oil and natural gas reserves, including in this part of the world. So we should all take a view, take a position about that's wrong, that's not what justice is. And when you have the head of state of a major country who claims that he doesn't care about international law, he only cares about his own morality, that's not really the real world that we should all expect our children to live in. Now, the other thing is that many people may be confused as to what's happening in the world of today. Allow me to share with you my view. I think the future generations of our children and grandchildren, when they look back upon 2026, they will say that 2026 will be judged as the beginning of the end of Pax Americana. Why? Because the United States is turning against itself. It is destroying all the principles it has stood upon, probably since after the end of the Second World War. And this is actually very dangerous. This creates all the incentives for all the countries in the world to stand firmly, to defend freedom, defend free trade, defend sovereignty and territorial integrity, and defend the sanctity of our sovereignty as well as territorial integrity, and to defeat anyone which wants to plunder your wealth and your riches and to violate the borders of other countries. When the United States did similar things to other countries, most of the people or most of the countries in the West pretend that they didn't see that. But when the United States threatened to take over Greenland against the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Denmark, and what is Denmark? Denmark has been a staunch ally of the United States ever since the end of the Second World War. So if the United States can do this to Denmark and try to grab a Greenland as if, they have the right to do that, and if the United States can really take over Canada against the explicit will of the people of Canada, this world is coming apart, and we should not really stand idly to see that this is being done. We need to know what's the right thing and what's the wrong thing. The United States has forced many countries over the past decade or so to pick and choose between the United States versus China. If you pick China, the United States will say, then you are the enemy of the United States, and you have to stand with the United States. For many years, I have declared no country in the world should be forced to pick and choose between China and the United States. Why? Because you need to use your own brain and do your own judgment to see whether the United States is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and whether China is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Now, if the United States is doing the wrong thing, as if they, for example, when they want to take over Greenland or Canada, why should you support the United States? And if China is doing the right thing, for example, promoting innovation on all fronts, etc., why don't you want to work with China? I'm so encouraged to see that Prime Minister Carney of Canada visited China recently after an absence of 8 years. I was very encouraged to see the Prime Minister of Britain, Mr. Starmer, visited China after an absence of 8 years. And when he went back to London, he said his predecessors committed a dereliction for not engaging with China for 8 years. I hope all these recent events mean something. That means the world is changing because of what the United States is doing against international law, against order, against a free trade. More and more people realize that they should not just follow blindly what the United States is doing. All of us need to use our brain and judgment and sanity, in many cases, to decide for ourselves what is the right thing and what is the wrong thing. Now, allow me to mention something very important. I understand there was a panel talking about AI this afternoon. Let me make some very basic points. AI should not mean American intelligence. AI is artificial intelligence for all mankind. And we should never allow any country to achieve AI dominance. Just imagine any country in the world achieves AI dominance. That will result automatically in violations of the sovereignty and territorial integrity and our national rights of so many other countries. And I coined a term called the AI divide. Don't be caught up on the wrong side of AI divide. And AI dominance, or building AI as if AI is American intelligence, will result in AI divide. So I think all of us, big or small, strong or weak, should really work together to make sure that AI should not result in AI divide, and AI should not result in AI dominance. Now, another point I want to emphasize is that I firmly believe AI should be open sourced, which China is doing, open sourced AI development. And I also want to share my observation. I think the closed sourced AI development as being practiced by the United States is doomed to failure. I do not have enough time to go into details as to why I think AI will be open sourced, and that is the mega trend, and closed sourced AI is doomed to failure. It may just take another 3 or 4 or 5 years to show to mankind that the closed sourced AI, involving high barriers in terms of the capital intensity as well as the technological intensity, is not going to work. Why? Because no one wants to live in a world when one so-called superpower will accelerate its superiority and dominance over all the other countries by holding AI dominance against you. That probably would be a nightmare for all of us. Therefore, I think if we look at all the ingredients giving rise to the AI development, either, for example, semiconductor chips development, the algorithm, the data, for example, and equally, if not even more importantly, power, that is generation of electricity. The United States does not control all of these things. China is moving forward very quickly. And if you allow me to make some observations, I think the US chips war is going to fail very miserably. Even NVIDIA very desperately wants to sell the most advanced GPU chips to China. China refused to buy. Do you know why? Because China has come up with equally good, if not even better, things. And China no longer needs to buy the semiconductor chips from the United States. However, allow me to share with you my observation. I think sooner or later, China and the United States need to cooperate with each other for the AI development. Because if China and the United States do not cooperate, do you know what will happen? Do you know who will be the winner of this AI rivalry? Most likely, it will not be either China or the United States. If China and the United States and the world community do not work together, do not engage in international cooperation, I think the ultimate winner may be AI. AI may want to dominate above Homo sapien, and all of us, Homo sapien, may become subjugated to the dominance of AI. So the sooner China and the United States start to cooperate with each other, the better it will be. Before I conclude, allow me to mention two things. One is that there is a very distinguished professor, the founding dean of Kennedy School at Harvard University, Professor Graham Allison, who wrote a book called Destined for War. He came up with this theory called the Thucydides trap. I found it uncomfortable from the very beginning, and I kept thinking about his Thucydides trap, or destined for war scenario, especially if applied to China and the United States, until I realized that this Thucydides trap, or the destined for war scenario applied to China and the United States, is a fallacy. Why? Because the distinguished Graham Allison, whom I highly respect, analyzed the major cases of war in history, but he forgot to tell all of us that all the cases of war he analyzed were conventional wars, whereas China and the United States are two of the most important nuclear powers. You simply cannot use the conclusion you derive at by analyzing conventional wars to China and the United States, which are two very important nuclear powers. To such an extent, I came up with my own theory. It's called inevitability of peace between China and the United States. So don't be fooled by anyone from Washington, either the State Department, CIA, FBI, or the Pentagon, whatever, who said China and the United States are going to fight a war. No, I think if there is any inevitability for the Americans, they say everyone is destined to die, then you need to pay tax. And then Victor Gao says the inevitability of peace. That means for whatever problems there are between China and the United States, we need to come up with a way to solve the problems in peace, in diplomacy, in negotiation with each other, rather than resorting to war. Why? Because the Americans will never be able to win a conventional war against China. Secondly, if the United States wants to impose a nuclear war on China, both China and the United States, and possibly mankind, will be destroyed in Armageddon. So I think we all need to live with the prospect of the inevitability of peace between China and the United States. So despite of all the turbulence, all the crisis, all the scary moments in the world of today, I hope the inevitability of peace between China and the United States will at least give us some reassurance. Finally, I learned to my great sadness that 256 journalists of Al Jazeera were killed after the beginning of the war in Gaza. Allow me to use this occasion to express my highest respect for each and all of these 256 Al Jazeera journalists killed in action, and allow me to convey my condolences to their families. And also allow me to express my highest respect to Al Jazeera as a news media, because I think the fact that all these journalists killed in action, 256 of them, were heroes for mankind because they sacrificed their own lives to allow people in the world to know the real truth about all these atrocities committed against the innocent Palestinian people in Gaza. So in this sense, I'm very honored to have this opportunity to share with you my observations about the major things I think about in the world, and I want to express my solidarity with Al Jazeera and also with all these 256 Al Jazeera heroes. They will always be in my heart